Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Over the last weekend, I was lucky enough to visit Blizzard headquarters to not only meet a ton of fantastic other content creators, hang out with them, etc., but also I was able to test out the brand new Spiritborn class and learn a lot about it, all thanks to Blizzard, so huge thanks to them. From the bottom of my heart, I'm actually extremely excited for the release of this class. I had an absolute blast playing it. I liked it way more than I thought that I actually would. It's probably going to be my new main, and honestly, I think it is the best designed class. It really just does a lot of the things that I love in ARPGs correctly. Regardless, I'm sure that you guys have been absolutely inundated with information about the Spiritborn today, as there's a ton of other videos out there and even the reveal live stream. So in today's video, I'm not going to be giving you like an in-depth explanation as to what the class actually is at a high level and show like every single skill that it has or the entire skill tree or anything like that. That would be a little bit redundant because everybody else is going to be doing that. So today I'm actually going to be showing you guys a build that I made in my short time while playing to kind of give you an example of what a functioning build would actually look like on the Spiritborn, something that you would probably use for leveling that kind of just synergized extremely well right off of the bat, and to show you guys some of the things that I thought were particularly strong and just a lot of fun to play with. Keep in mind, we only had 2 hours to play the class, and I obviously didn't get to test all that much, and a lot of stuff is subject to change. There was a lot of stuff that was very buggy, not very buggy, but some stuff that was obviously overpowered and a little bit buggy. This video is kind of just to give you an example of what you can expect from the Spiritborn, and I just wanted to show you guys what I was messing around with while I was there. I'll leave some links in the description to other videos that explain the class in a more general sense if you're interested in learning more about it, and I'd recommend watching those videos prior to watching this one so you can understand kind of how the class functions. Today's sponsor is one that I wish existed years ago when I was a little 14-year-old trying to learn how to code, and that is boot.dev. Boot.dev takes a super fun, kind of gamified approach to teaching you how to code, so you can learn back-end web development from start to finish in both Python and Go programming languages. Honestly, the best way to learn, especially for me, is when you're having fun and you really feel yourself improving, and it kind of feels like a game. And that's why Boot.dev makes a learning experience super enjoyable by incorporating some RPG-style mechanics to your journey. You can earn XP levels, get achievements, even complete quests, and compete for a top spot on a global leaderboard, which is really cool. This help keeps you goal-oriented and always feeling like you're actually accomplishing something and improving as you are learning. It's also designed in a way where you're going to be writing a ton of code. There is a really hands-on approach here, which helps a ton, so you're always engaged in learning at like a really fast pace. These days, programmers make an absolute killing, and it's one of the best professions to get into. According to a Stack Overflow survey, the median salary for backend developers in the US was over $100,000 in 2023, which is pretty insane, especially considering you can do all the work from the comfort of your home, and that is just the median salary. You can make way more than that. You can also create an account completely for free to take a look around and even view some demos, and if you end up trying it out, there's a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, which is very consumer friendly. If you click on the link in the description and you use my code, you can get 25% off your first payment on boot.dev, and that can either be for your first month or even for the first year depending on which subscription you use. Apply yourself and learn some amazing skills while having a great time over at boot.dev, and a huge thanks to them for sponsoring today's video. Fair warning, this is going to be a little bit scuffed because while I was there, I wasn't really thinking about making a video at all. I was just fully focused on playing. I didn't want to stress myself out with that. So the footage is a little bit scuffed. I kind of just gets stitched together some random footage to kind of show you guys all the skills and some of the stuff that I wanted to show off. Real quickly, let's just explain how the class actually functions at a baseline and kind of what its identity is. So there's a lot of different skills. Obviously, you have like, your augmentation skills, your movement skills, your defense skills, your ultimates, etc. Within the skill tree, there are 4 different types. So you have Jaguar, which is very aggressive, fast-paced, typically melee, and it is more like fire, sort of, or it looks like fire. And then there's Eagle, which is more about like movement speed. There's some range abilities. It's pretty much like lightning / just blue. And then there's Gorilla, which is more focused on sort of defense and scaling a lot of defense and then kind of turning that into damage. And it's just yellow. And then there's Centipede, which is more focused heavily on damage over time and some crowd control synergies, but this also can pair with Gorilla in some ways, which we'll talk about later. The class is very focused on trying to mix and match a lot of these different types, and it kind of creates some inherent synergies between a lot of the skills. Each different type of skill has its own passive associated with it. So for example, Jaguar has Ferocity, which is just a buff that is going to increase your attack speed per stack. Gorilla has some damage reduction, etc. The class mechanic, just like Barbarian Arsenal or Druid Spirit Boons, is that you get to pick between two different passive effects which are going to align with a certain type of spirit. The top one is significantly more potent than the bottom one, and the top one is also going to make all of your skills count as any of that other skill that you happen to pick. So if I'm using a Jaguar core skill, but then I pick the Eagle Spirit, all of my Jaguar core skill is now also going to count as an Eagle skill, kind of similar to how with Druid, you can get Tempest Roar so that your Storm skills also count as whatever skills, right? Real quickly, I'll just show you guys which ones they are, and I ended up opting for the Jaguar because it just seems to be the strongest, but there's Eagle. Anytime you use an Eagle skill, you just pop out some Storm Feathers, and it's going to make everything vulnerable. When you evade, you also do some damage. The Gorilla one seems pretty insane for survivability. Anytime you use a Gorilla skill, and keep in mind, just by using this, all of your skills now count as Gorilla skills. So anytime you just use a skill, you deal 100% thorns to enemies, and you get a barrier for your HP up to 40%. That is pretty insane, very good for a thorns build. And then there's a centipede one, where anytime you hit an enemy with a centipede skill, you reduce their damage. So it's kind of just like a survivability thing. In my opinion, these need a crazy amount of tuning, but again, this was a pretty early version of the build. I opted for the Jaguar one, even though I'm maining a Jaguar skill. Every fourth time you deal direct damage, with a skill, you unleash additional slashes dealing 100% of the damage of the 4 hits, so this effectively just doubles your damage output. And then you have the other passive here. For Jaguar, this one isn't great. It just increases your ferocity stacks, which is just going to give you some more attack speed, but there is other synergies with ferocity stacks, so maybe later on into the game that would be pretty good. There's Gorilla, which just gives you resolve. Anytime you use a Gorilla skill, you get resolve. And this just gives you some damage reduction, and if you have stacks of resolve, you get unstoppable. I actually didn't have any resolve in my build, but there's easy ways to get it without even having to use a Gorilla skill. So this would be your like sort of defensive option. And then Eagle is just some crit chance. I definitely think this needs to get reworked in my opinion because it's not a huge damage increase. And then Centipede is just healing anytime that you poison an enemy. So if you needed healing, that would be very good for that. Definitely think these need to get reworked in terms of a like potency standpoint because one of them just seems to be a little bit better than the others, but I guess these ones aren't supposed to be nearly as impactful as the top spirit. The skill that I chose to pretty much build entirely around was Rake. I quite liked it. It is a Jaguar skill, and as you can see at the time, I had the Eagle Spirit chose, so you can see that it has the Eagle tag there, but it's core skill and Jaguar skill. It costs a little bit of Vigor, which is this class's thing. It's pretty much just like having mana, but it regenerates much slower than mana does. It's about 3 per second. And you Conjure Claws to deal some damage, and then it does an additional explosion for extra damage, which is really nice. I found this skill to be extremely good for clearing. It just does a pretty significant, or a pretty decent amount of damage, but you can spam it quite a lot. And then anytime that you use Rake, because it is a Jaguar skill, you get a stack of Ferocity, which again just increases your attack speed, but there's a lot of stuff that synergizes with that. And then the Vigor cost of it is also going to be reduced per stack of Ferocity you have. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be legendaries and a lot of other stuff that's going to increase how many Ferocity stacks you can have. Each of the identities has its own ultimate pretty much associated with exactly what the identity is. So the Jaguar ult is literally just popping out a Jaguar, Eagle is an Eagle, Gorilla is a Gorilla, and the Centipede is a Centipede. Obviously, they have different varying power levels, and they do very different things. The Jaguar ult is, at least from what I can tell, probably the best one because, oh my god, is it insane what you can do. So it just does a crazy amount of damage, and it does it over multiple hits. So again, you can scale a lot of stuff that does extra hits, and this works with the Jaguar passive, so it just does crazy amount of damage, 200% total damage. And it does it in a massive AoE, which looks really cool. But you also get the modifier where it's going to instantly overfill your Ferocity stacks, and it's going to cause you to deal 100% increased damage to injured enemies, which isn't insane, but it's still a pretty good damage increase. And then the biggest part is while you have the Hunter active and it lasts for 8 seconds, you have a 15% chance when you get a kill to instantly reset its cooldown, and then it causes any cast within 8 seconds to also do additional damage, which will also work with the Jaguar passive and all this other stuff. So that is a huge damage increase. This was definitely bugged while I was playing, and it was just constantly resetting when it shouldn't have. Probably this will get fixed, but while you're just ad clearing or something, you have 8 seconds to kill like 6 enemies or 7 enemies, and you will most likely reset the cooldown on this. And not only does it do a crazy amount of damage, it also just leaps you forward. So for leveling, this is really good. Also, a lot of synergies with using an ultimate skill. For example, just here's one within the skill tree. Any enemy you kill while ultimate skill is active gives you a stack of Supremacy, which increases your damage by 3% up to 30%. And then when the ultimate skill ends, you gain 5 stacks of supremacy, but you begin to lose some of the stacks every second. So you can realistically, if you're spamming the ult over and over again, just have, chilling with a 30% damage increase. And there's a lot of other stuff based around having the ult active as well. But being able to just spam the skill and just do crazy amounts of damage, I think at one point it hit for like 9,000, probably a bug, but it was a lot of fun. The next skill is probably my absolute favorite one, and which is kind of crazy because there's so many that I really liked with this setup here. But this Ravager just does so many things. It's an incarnate skill, but it's kind of like an augmentation skill. First off, it has a passive, so your minimum ferocity, you'll always just be at 2 stacks of ferocity. Secondly, anytime you use it, it's just going to do a roar, causing all of your attacks to just deal extra damage, so 60% extra damage, which is extremely powerful. And then it has the modifiers where the duration is extended by 2 seconds per kill while active. So as long as you're just getting kills, you can pretty much keep this up all the time. There's also a lot of cooldown reduction stuff within the skill tree and within Legendary, so you can pretty much just have Ravager up 100% of the time. And while it's active, your core skills will instantly dash. So as you can see here, I just use my rake and it just dashes to enemies like I have dash on. It's kind of like having lunging strike on, but for any of your skills, which is just insane. And your vigor regeneration is increased by 30% multiplicatively, so it really helps out with the resource economy. So not only is the skill really good for movement and for your resource economy, but it also just gives you a pretty significant amount of damage. Very, very good early on. This skill alone kind of already made it feel like I had like a pretty decent build going, because you just slap this on and boom, you can just have this up all the time and you're just flying through. Obviously, no build is complete without a movement skill, and you probably thought we already had enough movement skills, but with me, you can never have enough because I like going fast, and Soar is unbelievably strong. It's kind of like Sork Teleport, but it does a little bit more. It's not as good as Teleport, I would say, but it kind of just has a lot of the really good things about Soar or Teleport baked in. So you fly into the air and you create a cloud around you, which is going to make any enemy that you hit vulnerable for 5 seconds, and then it's also just going to deal an okay amount of damage. But the cloud that makes enemies vulnerable actually remains around you for 7 seconds, and you can get the cooldown on this to be really low, so you can just pretty much perpetually apply vulnerable just by using Soar. Not only that, though, it also is going to make your next hit against an enemy, if they are hit by Soar, it's going to crit, and if it doesn't hit any enemy at all, it's just going to give you 50% increased movement speed. One of my favorite things about this is it kind of sucks the enemies inwards, kind of like Raiment, so if you use it, you can pretty much use it as an engagement skill to instantly make enemies vulnerable, and then it's going to make your next hit a guaranteed crit, so you can just hit them with a crit, which is really good early on, especially when you have a low crit. And if you're just using it for movement, pressing it will just give you 50% increased movement speed as well. And with this passive, based on how much you traveled, your mobility skill will get its cooldown reduced. And like I said, there's a lot of cooldown reductions. You can easily get Soar to be a very low cooldown. And it's nice to have a skill that isn't like, obviously I just have a lot of Jaguar skills, but it is very nice to actually have a skill that is an Eagle skill or something else on your bar for the key passive here. First glance, this key passive is one of the stronger ones. There's the poison one that is unbelievably busted, but I didn't want to go poison build. I just wanted to go full melee brain, ook ook. And this is pretty nice for that. So anytime that I just use my Eagle skill, it's going to give me 30% movement speed. But if I immediately use a different skill, it's just going to swap to that bonus. So I'm mainly using Jaguar, so I'm just going to have 30% attack speed almost all the time. But if I happen to use my sword and there's no enemies around, I get the 50% movement speed plus another 30%, so 80%. And because I used a different skill that was a different base spirit, I gained the additional 30% damage almost all the time. It would be nice if they made it to where some of these passives kind of lingered a little bit, so it incentivized using more different skills, because otherwise you're just going to be spamming like your Jaguar skill and you're just going to keep the attack speed up all the time and not really benefit from some of these other things. But getting 30% lifesteal all the time with Centipede skills would probably be a little bit OP. But a lot of stuff with this class is really OP. And the last skill that I decided to go with, which is another Jaguar skill, again, I kind of just went full Jaguar, is Counterattack. This one is pretty insane as well. It has 2 charges, and it is on a 14-second cooldown, but you can also reduce it quite a lot. It has a passive where you just gain 20% dodge chance flat, and you automatically retaliate against enemies whenever you dodge. So you just do a pretty significant amount of damage when you dodge, and it has an active ability where you pretty much gain 100% dodge chance for 2 seconds when you activate it. Upgrading is just going to increase the passive dodge chance and the additional damage, but it has these modifiers which I really like. So its cooldown is reduced per stack of ferocity you have, and again, there's probably other ways to get a lot of stacks of ferocity, which is a damage increase, but also will help out with this. but it's also going to passively increase your crit damage by 10% for every close enemy, which is a pretty decent damage increase. I wouldn't say this is like the best defensive skill, but having at least one defensive skill on your bar is really good. But the benefit of this is activating it gives you 100% crit chance, right? And you just passively get some dodge, which is nice. But realistically, you could probably get the cooldown on this really low, and there's a crazy amount of stuff that synergizes with having dodge chance with Spiritborn. I'd say this is probably the weakest skill that I had on. There's a lot of other defensive skills that were pretty good, but the idea of having 100% dodge chance is really nice, and there's stuff like this where when you dodge an attack, you trigger a 350% Thorns attack against the attacker, and if you were to get a really low cooldown on counterattack and be able to spam it, and then you built heavily into Thorns, you could very easily see where this is going, especially with the Gorilla skill passive counting, making the counterattack skill count as a Gorilla skill, also doing Thorns. There's a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on there. I was mainly just using it for the passive benefit while leveling, and obviously my survivability wasn't really much of a problem. Put all that together, and without even really any legendaries at all, I had like one legendary that made Rake do an additional attack for a little bit of extra damage. I think it's 45% increased damage. Really, that's like the only legendary that I had. You put all that together just at a baseline, not even like, you know, super min-maxing or anything. You did this within like an hour pretty much. And you have a build that feels extremely responsive. You have pretty good energy regen. I had a basic skill, so anytime that I just ran out of vigor, I would just boom, press my basic skill, pretty much went back to full. I have absolutely insane mobility, vulnerable application. You can spam the ult like crazy. The damage was really high, and it just feels really fluid to play, and it felt really, really fast, which is pretty insane to say from a level 30 character. This is without any tempering manuals. This is with absolutely nothing. The elephant in the room here is that I pretty much went full Jaguar, which was a little stupid of me, but I really just liked the Rake skill, and I kind of just put stuff on the bar that appealed to me immediately. There's probably, like, what's crazy is that this is good by default, right? I didn't really have to do anything at all to make this good. It just worked right off of the bat. So imagine if I actually had more time, and there's a crazy amount of synergies that you can use, swap between a whole bunch of the different skills, and there's a lot of legendaries that seem to be extremely powerful as well. So this is like the class at an absolute baseline, right? But the whole point of the class is kind of hybridization and trying and mixing and maxing a whole bunch of things, kind of like Druid, but Druid on crack, right? So the fact that it was this powerful and felt this good, kind of just right out the gate, I think is a really good omen for the class, and it was a lot of fun, honestly. I just had a lot of fun, felt great, and just looking at a lot of the skills and seeing kind of how powerful they were, and like seeing a lot of the opportunity there for the build crafting. This is like without uniques as well. There's uniques that grant skill tags to different class or different skills, etc. Like, this is just an absolute build crafter's dream, and it is just a lot of fun to play. Probably like 100% going to be my next main. If I had to describe the class in any way, I'd probably say, at least from the build that I played and kind of seeing the different skills, I'd say like a monk plus sort of like a shaman. But there are range skills as well, and the skills definitely feel different, so it really just depends on what skills you're playing and the kind of build that you go for. Anyways, that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you guys found the video enjoyable, and I will see you guys later. Peace.